My daughter's birthday came and went, and just like last year, my family didn't show up. I stood in the backyard looking at the decorations we had set up: balloons, streamers, and a new basketball hoop. Nothing too fancy, just something special for a little girl who had been talking about this day since April. As the sun began to set, a few of her classmates arrived, bringing a bit of life to the gathering. They laughed, played, and ate cake. We even had her favorite cookies and cream. But I saw my daughter's eyes, how they kept darting to the gate every time someone new arrived, hoping it would be one of them. Her grandparents, maybe, or her cousins. Each time it wasn't, a little bit of the light in her eyes dimmed. I didn't have the heart to tell her that no one else was coming, so when she asked if they were stuck in traffic, I just said maybe. My husband tried his best to keep her spirits up, got her to blow out the candles and open presents. She smiled, but it was forced, not the genuine happiness I wanted for her. No one called, not my parents, not my sister, not a single text or FaceTime. It was as if the day didn't exist for them. That night, I was furious, not surprised, just done. I went to our family group chat and sent a message. "Thanks for remembering your niece and granddaughter's birthday. She had a great time without you." They saw it. I knew they did, but no one replied. The silence was deafening. The next morning, I still held on to a sliver of hope that maybe they'd realize how wrong it was. But when my sister Lily finally responded, all she said was, "It's not like it was a big birthday. 9 isn't even a milestone." I just stared at the message, unable to comprehend how anyone could think a child's happiness depended on whether the birthday number had a 0 in it. Just when I thought I couldn't be more disappointed, the real blow came. It was Thursday afternoon when I received a notification on my phone. $2,900 withdrawn from my account. I initially thought it was fraud, but when I checked the details, I felt like an absolute fool. A week before the party, my dad had called, claiming their plumbing had failed and they needed emergency repairs. He said it would cost around $600 and that the plumber required payment the same day. Caught off guard, juggling party preparations and work, I agreed to cover it temporarily. I gave him my card details, intending to sort it out later, but in the chaos, I forgot. That was on me. But what they did with it, that was on them. I tried calling my dad. No response. I called again. Nothing. Then I tried Lily, but she also didn't pick up. I messaged the family group chat, but it was as if they had vanished. So I sent one last message, short and to the point. "Wait for a call from my lawyer." Within 10 minutes, chaos erupted. Lily bombarded me with voice messages, acting like I had overstepped. Then my dad called repeatedly, and finally my mom texted me, urging me not to do anything rash. I was beyond frustrated. 2 hours later, my dad showed up at my door, holding my card like it was some kind of peace offering. No apology, no sign of regret, just an explanation that they had decided last minute to go to the Keys with friends and figured they'd use the card now and settle it later. He actually thought I'd understand. I stood there listening to him justify taking $2,900 from me, just days after ignoring his granddaughter's birthday. He spoke as if the issue was my reaction, not his actions. I took the card and said we'd talk later, but I knew there wouldn't be a later. Something within me had changed. I was done playing the role they expected of me, the reliable one, the one who fixes things. They made their choice, and now it was my turn. You know, when I look back at it, everything seems surreal, almost like a bad dream I can't shake off. I remember that trip they took to the Keys. It was supposed to be a getaway with friends, a simple escape, and I thought it would be easier for them to just use my card instead of dealing with all the bank limits and credit issues. They said they would tell me everything when they returned. And the worst part, his tone, like I should have understood, like this was a routine thing. He said, "We needed it more than you did." I just closed the door. I couldn't trust myself to speak because I knew whatever I said would only escalate the situation. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling till the early hours. My thoughts wouldn't stop racing. I kept thinking about my daughter, waiting by the gate for them to show up on her birthday, and how they could just forget about it, like it didn't matter. And then to casually deplete my account for their vacation, it was just too much. All those times I helped them out, whether it was with bills, repairs, or groceries, it was always the same story. But still, I wanted to give them a chance to make it right. So I sent a message to the family group chat, keeping it straightforward. I told them they spent $2,900 that wasn't theirs and expected it back by Friday. Lily saw the message but didn't say anything. Later that night, my mom replied, saying, "We'll work something out after the trip." She reminded me how hard the year had been for them financially, but they weren't struggling in the Keys. Just that month, they had asked for help with new kitchen appliances. I bought them a dishwasher and stove, $600 out of my pocket. They promised to pay me back. But now, it seemed like that promise was just another grain of sand washed away by the ocean. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that they never intended to repay me. They assumed I'd let it go, like always. Because I was the one who didn't argue, who always stepped in, especially for Lily. She was in law school, and I'd been covering her rent for the last year and a half, $750 every month, because Mom and Dad said she needed to focus and I was capable. But that morning, I called the landlord and informed him that Lily would be responsible for the full rent from the next month. He seemed surprised but didn't argue, said he'd inform her. Then I sent another message to the family chat stating that I wouldn't be covering Lily's rent anymore, and that she could talk to Mom and Dad if she needed help. There was a silence for an hour, and then Lily called. I didn't pick up. Messages started flooding in. My mom accused me of being cruel, of punishing Lily for something she didn't do, of hurting the family to make a point. But I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just done being the family's wallet. I replied with one sentence, "You all had money for a vacation. I'm sure you'll figure out rent." After that, there was silence. 2 days passed, and then Lily called again, crying. I still didn't answer. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about them learning to live without me picking up their slack. But they weren't ready for that lesson, not yet. It wasn't just about the comics. It was my whole childhood wrapped in those pages. Each book, each issue had a story behind it. First editions, signed copies, rare finds from obscure shops and online auctions. I had spent hours in lines, bidding wars, carefully packing and labeling each piece, ensuring them as if they were precious artifacts, 20 years of my history neatly stored. When I realized they were missing, I texted my dad, asking where my comic collection was. The silence was deafening. No reply came. I called, but it went straight to voicemail, so I left a message. I told him if he had sold or thrown away any part of that collection, I would never forgive him. That wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Later that night, he finally texted back. The message was cold and dismissive. "We needed the room. You never came to get it. It was collecting dust. Don't be dramatic." I stared at the screen, waiting for a follow-up, expecting him to say he was joking or reassure me that everything was safely boxed up in the garage. But no other message came. That was his explanation, his justification. He knew what the collection was worth financially, but more importantly, he knew what it meant to me. It was one of the few connections to my past that I still cherished, entrusted to him, and he had either discarded it or sold it, perhaps as a way to punish me for refusing to cover their rent. It felt like they wanted to hurt me for saying no, for standing up for myself. What they didn't expect was the anger that would follow. They had never seen me truly angry before, but they were about to. There was still one thing they had that belonged to me, my car, and I decided it was time to reclaim it. Once I understood that my comic collection was gone, a profound stillness settled within me. I didn't rage or scream or create a scene. I just felt an emptiness toward them, a detachment that made everything real. It wasn't the money they took or the way they ignored my daughter's birthday that hit hardest. It was the erasure of 20 years of my life, done without a word. I didn't need more confirmation. His message made it clear. They needed the room. I shouldn't be dramatic. They hadn't sold the comics out of necessity or misplaced them by accident. They decided they didn't matter, and by extension, neither did I. They didn't realize they'd made their final move. The last thing they still possessed of mine was the SUV, an old but well-maintained vehicle I'd lent to my dad when his car broke down. He'd asked to use it for a few months until he could afford a replacement, but those few months stretched into over a year. They treated it like it was theirs, parked in their driveway, insurance documents changed to their address. But I had never signed over the title, and now I was done playing nice. The next morning, I gathered every document I could find: title, insurance, original registration. All of it still bore my name. I called the DMV to ensure everything was updated to my current address, contacted the insurance company to remove him as a listed driver, and arranged for a tow service to stand by. I drove to their house without sending a text or knocking on the door. With the spare key I had never given them, I unlocked the car and began emptying the contents. My dad came outside mid-task, coffee in hand, looking bemused as if it were all a joke. He asked what I was doing, and I told him plainly that I was taking back my car. He'd had it long enough. He laughed, dismissing my actions as absurd, claiming he needed the car and that I couldn't do this over some old books and birthday drama. I paused, looked at him, and said, "No, I'm doing this because you took from me without a second thought. You let your granddaughter wait all day on her birthday, used my card without asking, and destroyed something that mattered to me. You're not entitled to my things anymore." His voice rose, questioning if I was willing to throw away our relationship over this. I didn't respond. I finished clearing out the car, got in, and drove away. No speeding, no door slamming, just leaving. That night, he called twice. I ignored both calls. The voicemail he left said we needed to talk, that things had gone too far, that he wanted to fix it. I listened to the entire message and realized he wasn't sorry. He just didn't like losing control. For the first time, I wasn't giving it back. After reclaiming the SUV, things went silent for a few days. I assumed they were regrouping, plotting a new way to guilt me back into the fold, as they had done before, ignoring me, then pretending nothing happened, a passive-aggressive reset. But this time it felt different. It's strange how silence can speak so loudly. That day, the quiet in the room felt heavy, almost like something was waiting to happen. I remember thinking it was odd, but I didn't know yet what was coming. Then my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was calm, almost mechanical, as if she'd rehearsed what to say. She didn't call to chat, just left a message. She spoke about things escalating, and I could tell she was trying to sound reasonable, but it felt like she was just trying to control the situation. She hoped I would reconsider everything before it became irreparable. She said Dad was just trying to fix things in his way, and that I needed to be the bigger person once again. It was always the same story, me being the bigger person, carrying the burden of their mistakes. I listened to it once, then deleted it. I wanted to go on with my day, pretend it didn't bother me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over. 2 nights later, my husband came home with a package he found on our doorstep. There was no return address, just my name written in black ink. I recognized my dad's handwriting immediately. I felt a knot in my stomach as I opened the small cardboard box. It was taped shut and rattled when I shook it. Inside, I found ashes and scraps of paper. Some were almost dust, others had bits of color and letters. I knew what they were: remnants of my comic book collection, titles I knew by heart: X-Men #4, The Killing Joke, Detective Comics #475, even a rare Spider-Man issue I had won at an auction. He had taken what was left of my collection, what hadn't been thrown away or given, and burned it. Cremated my past and left it on my doorstep. No note, no explanation. It was the most deliberate action he'd ever taken. I didn't cry or scream. I just sat there and stared at the ashes, feeling like I'd lost a part of myself. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice he made. He wanted to ensure I couldn't return to that part of my life, and he succeeded. He burned the bridge himself. The next morning, I took action. I logged into the app for the Lexus they still used, a car I had bought outright and let them use. I paid for it, registered it in my name, and insured it but never signed over the title. I cut their remote access, called a tow company, and scheduled a pickup for that afternoon. By 6:00, the car was gone. At 6:42 p.m., my phone rang. My dad was calling. This time, I answered. He didn't ask how I was or mention the comics. He went straight to demanding answers about the car, accusing me of being unstable and ungrateful. He said I'd embarrassed him and was trying to destroy what little we had left. I let him talk, didn't interrupt. When he finally stopped, I told him I wasn't playing along anymore. That hit him hard. There was a pause, then he asked if this was it after everything he'd done for me. I said yes. He hung up without another word. I looked at the silent phone screen and felt a sense of peace for the first time in years. But it wasn't over. I thought I had closed that chapter of my life. Then Lily called. 2 days after the last call with Dad, after the ashes and the Lexus, she reached out. I almost didn't answer. I expected more drama, more guilt trips, but something told me to pick up. She didn't sound like herself. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just quiet. She admitted she knew everything was broken and regretted not stopping them when she should have. There was a pause, and I could tell she was deciding whether to continue. She confessed she didn't agree with what they did, didn't know about the comics being burned until it was too late, and then didn't know how to reach out. She was scared I'd cut her off or worse, that I'd never speak to her again. Then she said something unexpected. She wasn't asking for anything, just wanted me to know she didn't have them. They didn't help her with rent, school, or anything. She was on her own. She'd been trying to hold everything together, classes, part-time work, student debt. And when I pulled the rent support, she panicked. Not out of entitlement, but because she had no other options. She hadn't told them I was still helping with rent because they'd never offered to help. They thought she was breezing through law school, unaware of how much she was struggling. I didn't know what to say. I stayed silent for a while, processing everything. I remember that moment clearly. It was like a small, unexpected moment of clarity amidst a storm of emotions. She looked at me and said she understood why I stopped. She said she wasn't like the others, and somehow it felt genuine coming from her. She wasn't trying to twist the situation or justify anything. She just sounded tired, like all the energy had been drained from her. I asked her about her rent, and after a moment of hesitation, she told me it was $750. I nodded, letting her know she'd have it by tomorrow. There was no immediate gratitude, no tears, just a promise to repay me someday. I told her it wasn't about the money, and it truly wasn't. Money had never been the issue. It was about the line, the one everyone else had crossed, burned, and spat on. She was the only one who saw it and chose to step back. I know it doesn't fix everything, but in my family, an honest sentence can mean more than endless fake apologies. So I decided to help her. That amount each month wouldn't break me, and she was the only one who hadn't broken herself. It's been a few weeks since that chaotic time. The ashes, the car, that last call with my dad. Things have quieted down, at least from their side. My mom hasn't called, and my dad hasn't tried to reach out since I cut him off. My husband once ran into my mom at the store. They made brief eye contact before she turned away. Lily, on the other hand, has been consistent, sending her rent confirmations every month, even though I never asked. She checks in once or twice a week, but never pushes. I can sense she's being cautious, but she's making an effort. Then, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A handwritten letter with no return address, just my name on the front in shaky, careful cursive. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my grandfather's, my dad's dad. We hadn't spoken in years, not out of any conflict, just the distance between us. He moved out west after my grandmother passed away, and our interactions were limited to the occasional Christmas card or a birthday call that felt more obligatory than sincere. I wouldn't have thought he knew what had happened, but he did. Apparently, one of my cousins follows Lily on social media and pieced things together from her cryptic posts. Something about family ties unraveling and truths not staying buried. It was enough to stir up gossip. The letter was short, just a page and a half, but every word resonated. He didn't scold me or attempt to mend things on their behalf. Instead, he expressed pride in me. He acknowledged my father's difficult nature, how he'd watched him hurt and manipulate people, even as a young man. He said standing up for myself, for my child, and refusing to be the family scapegoat took more strength than most people possess. He wished he had found the same courage at some point. Near the end, he mentioned having a spare room and welcomed me if I ever needed a place to get away, with no questions or judgment. He left his number. I haven't called yet. I'm not sure what I'd say. But that letter broke through something I didn't even realize had formed. A weight, a numbness. It reminded me that not everyone in my family line is broken. Maybe I hadn't lost my entire family, just the wrong parts. Discovering what peace truly feels like when you've never experienced it is strange. It's not a dramatic moment like in the movies. It's quiet, still, the absence of chaos. I used to believe I needed them, that even when they hurt me, they were still my family, that somehow if I worked harder, gave more, forgave quicker, they'd see me differently, love me in a way that didn't demand sacrifice as proof. But they didn't. They loved the version of me that kept things together, that filled in the gaps, that paid the bills, answered calls, and said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. They didn't know me, and they didn't care to. What they cared about was having access to my money, my time, my willingness to be silenced by guilt. And when that ran out, so did their show of affection. My husband noticed the change before I did. He began leaving sticky notes around the house with messages like, "Proud of you," "You're doing the hard thing," and "She's lucky to have you," referring to our daughter. He conveyed it without words, that I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was showing our daughter what boundaries look like, that love doesn't mean allowing people to hurt you multiple times. That family isn't just about blood, but about who shows up, who stays, who says, "I'm sorry," and means it. That forgiveness isn't earned by time alone, but through action and change. It's hard to look at your parents and realize they'll never teach you how to be loved. Sometimes you have to learn it yourself. Some days everything feels manageable. I get through the motions, ticking off boxes, feeling okay. But then there are days when the emptiness creeps in and I find myself missing them. Or maybe it's not even them that I miss, but the idea of what they could have been. The potential of what our relationship could have been if things were different. Every time I think about reaching out, about picking up the phone and calling them, I'm pulled back to reality by memories that cut deeper than any words could. I remember the ash in the box, the silence that echoed on her birthday, the money they took without asking, as if it was their right. Those moments are etched in my mind, a constant reminder of the boundaries that were crossed, of the trust that was shattered. And then there's Lily. She's different. She was the only one who came to me after everything fell apart. She didn't come with demands or expectations. She didn't ask me to forget or pretend, but she asked for a chance to do better, to be better. And I gave her that chance. Not because I felt like the bigger person or because I owed her anything, but because she asked the right way. She showed vulnerability, a willingness to change, and I saw a reflection of myself in her. She was drowning quietly, trying to prove her worth to people who never truly appreciated her. Now we stay in touch. We talk about school, about stress, and sometimes about nothing at all. I still support her financially, paying her rent, but she insists on sending me receipts, as if she needs to prove herself. She doesn't have to, but I understand. We both need to prove, maybe even to ourselves, that we're not like them, that we're different. The holidays came and went without a word from them. No calls, no texts, no invites. My mom posted a picture of their Christmas dinner, just her and my dad, smiling in front of a rented fireplace. She captioned it with peace and gratitude. I didn't comment or react. I didn't let it touch me. My daughter asked if her grandparents were coming this year. I told her no, and when she asked why, I explained that sometimes grown-ups don't know how to be kind, even to those they should love. She looked at me and said, "That's sad." I nodded. "It is." We had our own dinner, just the three of us. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was enough. Her laughter filled the house as she unwrapped a book she wanted and a stuffed bear in a red sweater. My husband captured the moment. Her face lit up with pure joy. Later that night, as I looked at that photo, I realized that this was family. This was enough. It wasn't about getting back at them anymore. It was about healing. There's a difference between slamming a door and quietly locking it. What I did wasn't out of anger, but acceptance. Acceptance that they were never going to be what I needed, that the love I spent years chasing was never going to come. And it wasn't because I wasn't enough, it was because they weren't capable. I used to think setting boundaries was an act of war, that saying no would make me the villain. But sometimes no is the kindest thing you can say to yourself. No, you can't have my peace. No, you can't borrow my future to pay for your past. No, I won't shrink myself to fit your comfort. The silence that followed has been louder than I expected, but it's also been kinder. I've started sleeping better, eating slower, smiling without feeling the need to flinch. My daughter mentioned the other day that I laugh more now. She said it so casually, but I felt it like a ray of sunlight breaking through years of fog. She's noticing. She sees me, the real me. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough. Recently, I finally called my grandfather. The letter he'd sent had been sitting in my drawer for weeks, read and reread, the edges worn like something sacred. I wasn't sure what I was going to say when he picked up, but he answered on the second ring. He just said my name, Eliza, with warmth and no judgment, like I hadn't waited too long. We talked for nearly an hour about nothing significant, the weather, his dog, my job, my daughter's latest fascination with planets and telescopes. He didn't mention my parents, didn't ask what happened, didn't pry for details. He knew enough already. Before we hung up, he told me, "That room's still open, if you ever need space to breathe." I thanked him, not just for the room, but for seeing me, for reminding me that not all roots are rotten, that some go deep and remain strong and kind, even if they're rare. That night, after our daughter fell asleep, I sat on the porch with my husband. It was quiet, just the distant hum of the street lamps and the soft sounds of the night. He told me I'd changed. I asked if it was for better or worse, and he smiled, saying, "For real." Maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not repayment, but to be real. To be loved without having to suffer first. To be heard without screaming. To exist without feeling drained. Now I'm building that life, one choice at a time. One wall rebuilt, one door left locked. My family didn't just forget my daughter's birthday. They reminded me of who they truly are. And I finally believe them. So this is the epilogue, the after, the peace. Not because everything's perfect, but because I've stopped trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed. Because I've stopped giving parts of myself to those who never give anything back.